Okay, so today we're going to dive into something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And it's this idea of shifting your internal monologue, your thought processes directly into English.
Yeah.
And we've got a really interesting resource here that outlines some pretty solid strategies for how to do this. And, our mission today is really to sort of break down the most effective techniques so that you can make that jump from translating in your head to actually thinking in English.
Yeah. And the reason I think that this is so powerful is because, you want to get to a point where you're speaking quickly and naturally. And a lot of times what holds people back is that they're translating in their head.
Right.
So if you can eliminate that step, then you're going to see huge gains in terms of your fluency, but also just your confidence.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first technique this text highlights is really about building a basic foundation
Right.
in English, starting with your immediate environment.
Yep.
And it talks about this idea of simple immersion. So,
Yeah.
label things around your house in English. Describe what you see as you see it. Simple things like the cup is blue or I am sitting down.
Exactly. And I think the core benefit here is that you're creating direct links between the English word
Yeah.
and the actual item, the actual action, without having to go through that step of translating in your native language.
You're cutting out the middleman.
You're cutting out the middleman, exactly.
Okay, so you're starting to think in English with the things around you. What about that internal narrative? Like, how do we get our thoughts to actually run in English?
Yeah, so the text recommends this idea of narrating your day-to-day activities, but in English.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so, I am walking to the kitchen, the sun is shining, just basic descriptions of what you're doing as you're doing them.
So it's like you're giving yourself constant English commentary.
Exactly. And what's great about that is it's low pressure. You're not actually talking to another person, but you're getting that practice of forming sentences and you're internalizing the grammar.
And the sentence structure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we're narrating our day. We're starting to think in these simple sentences. What about taking it a step further with, having full-on conversations in English?
Yeah, so this is where the source suggests, having those mental conversations with yourself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, you can replay past interactions that you've had, but replay them in English, or you can imagine future conversations.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like a mental rehearsal.
Yeah.
And what that does is it reduces the cognitive load when you're actually in a real conversation.
Oh, because you've kind of already gone through it in your head.
Exactly.
So it's less pressure.
It's less pressure. You've already, mentally navigated those scenarios.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're practicing these internal conversations. The text also mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, which is leveraging everyday technology.
Right.
Like our phones or apps.
Yes.
How can we use that to our advantage?
So it's actually quite simple. Just switch the language on your phone and your apps to English.
Okay.
And even when you're, making a to-do list or planning your day, try to do that thinking in English.
So it's like a passive form of immersion.
Exactly. You're constantly being exposed to the language, even in those small everyday interactions.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're building up all of this internal English, but obviously at some point we need to actually put it into practice.
Right.
And the text emphasizes, speaking with others, friends, online communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it also suggests if that's not always feasible, to use things like AI language tools or even recording yourself speaking.
Yeah, I think that's really smart because it allows you to identify, where you're strong, where you might need more practice. And that feedback loop is so important.
Absolutely.
Even if it's coming from, an AI, it's still valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got all these strategies. The source also talks about this idea of deep immersion.
Yes.
Surrounding yourself with English media, movies, podcasts, books, and a really interesting technique called shadowing.
Yeah, I love shadowing.
So for people who don't know, what is shadowing?
So shadowing is basically you listen to a native speaker and you try to repeat exactly what they're saying, like immediately after they say it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like a real-time mimicry.
Exactly. And it's fantastic for pronunciation, for intonation. You start to pick up on the rhythm, the flow of the language.
Yeah. And I imagine that also helps with comprehension.
Absolutely.
Because you're really paying attention to every single word.
You're forced to. You have to keep up.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. We've talked about simple immersion, internal narrative, mental conversations using technology speaking, and then this idea of deep immersion.
Right.
And I think, the key takeaway that the source really stresses is this is a gradual process.
It is.
Patience and consistent effort are so important.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially rewiring your brain.
Right.
So it's going to take time. You're not going to be able to do this overnight. But the more you practice, the more you incorporate these strategies into your daily life, the more natural it will become to think in English.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really empowering message for people to take away.
It is.
It's not about being perfect.
Yeah.
It's about those small, consistent steps.
Exactly. And I would encourage everyone listening to just pick one or two of these strategies this week and try to actively incorporate them into your routine.
That's a great challenge.
Yeah, and just see how that starts to shift your relationship with the language. Even those small changes can lead to big results over time.
I love that. I think that's a perfect place to end it on.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for this deep dive. It's been really enlightening.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.